Now joined by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the USA. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us on DD India News Hour. Could you shed some light on the special geopolitical situation which gave this Quad foreign ministers meeting added significance?
I think that the Quad meeting took place at a time when there is considerable instability in the world and conflict. You know, the conflict between Israel and Iran has just halted after fairly devastating exchanges and launches of jet fighters and missiles. The conflict in Gaza is still going on, in Ukraine is still going on, and there is a new US administration which is looking anew at many US policies and initiatives. So, though one meeting was held along with President Trump's inaugural, that was a brief meeting, but this meeting gives the signal that the Quad will continue to be of importance to the US and that the initiatives which were launched previously under the Quad will be carried forward. The discussions focused on maritime and transnational security, economic prosperity and security, critical and emerging technologies, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. These are the 4 areas which were given special attention and where the activities of the Quad will be carried forward. They also launched a Quad Critical Minerals Initiative, which will look at diversifying supply chains, which will be reliable and where there will be less dominance by any one country, so that these supplies cannot be constricted, because all the countries have felt the Chinese pressure. India, for instance, is being deprived of rare earth magnets, which are required for EVs, electric vehicles, and discussions are going on with the Chinese government on this. The US was squeezed on supply of rare earths, where China has a kind of monopoly at present during the negotiations. And so these are issues which impact the economic prosperity of all countries. And therefore, this is something which is mentioned in the Quad statement, so that no one country can constrict supplies arbitrarily.
Okay. The joint statement from the Quad foreign ministers meeting condemned in the strongest terms the dastardly terrorist attack in Pahalgam. Your reaction to that?
I think it's good that they did. And the foreign minister had also stated his expectation that there would be a Quad condemnation of terrorism and that there should be zero tolerance for terrorism. He had also articulated that India has the right to defend its people from the hostile activities of terrorists, and that it will do so in future. So the fact that this joint condemnation by Quad of the Pahalgam incident is included in the statement is a good thing, because it reinforces that there can be no selective approach to terrorism. And so I think that's something to be welcomed.
Okay, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar, speaking at the Quad meeting, emphasized the need for a decisive global response to terrorism. What are the impediments to such a decisive global response to terror?
I think the main impediment is that there's no commonly and universally accepted norms of what defines terrorism. And there are many countries who say, freedom fighters cannot be equated with terrorists. But the point is that you have to look at acts of violence going outside the rule of law as hostile activities, irrespective of what the political circumstances are. And that is what India's stance has been. It's been trying to get a comprehensive global convention on terrorism. But these differences have held up the finalization of such a convention.
Okay, as the Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong pointed out at the Quad meeting, that the meet was held against the backdrop of conflict and of escalating competition. Could you shed some light on the why of and the reasons for this escalating competition? And can this competition be given a positive orientation?
Well, the escalating competition is primarily between the US and China. It has different dimensions. It has a security dimension, it has an economic dimension, and it has a technological dimension, because the two countries are competing for supremacy in this region, in the Indo-Pacific region, and of course across the world, in all these areas, but concentrated in the Indo-Pacific. So the impact of that sharpening competition is being felt across the world. And of course, China has also created excess economic production capacities, which it doesn't absorb in its own market. And now countries are beginning to look at choking such subsidized exports, which is harming their economies, shifting jobs elsewhere, and actually resulting in unfair trade. So this has been the US focus. Of course, President Trump's focus has also been that all countries are free riders on the US and they should open their economies, otherwise I will impose tariffs. So I think that has also unsettled the global economic system, because so many trade negotiations are currently going on with the US. I mean, the US has reached only one agreement, minor agreement with the UK, which is a framework agreement on trade. But with China, it has put in place a temporary agreement, which will be there for 90 days. And if they fail to reach a final agreement in those 90 days, then the punitive tariffs which were imposed of nearly 145% will come back. In the temporary agreement, it's 35% tariffs, which will be imposed on Chinese imports into the US, and China will impose 10% tariffs on the US exports to China. But this is a temporary 90-day arrangement with India, with the EU, with Japan, with Vietnam. I think negotiations are still going on with Canada, with Mexico. The US is still engaged in negotiations. And so there's an element of uncertainty which has come into the global environment.
Okay, each edition of Quad has witnessed the introduction of a more critical nuance against Beijing. So how do you see the evolution of Quad grouping in that context?
Well, the Quad is committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific and to preserving the rule of law, and international law in particular. And it doesn't support and it actively opposes also any actions going outside the boundaries of the Law of the Sea Convention and international law, such as unilateral action on maritime disputes, which has been happening in the South and East China Sea. The Quad also emphasized the importance of respecting the territorial and integrity and sovereignty of countries in the region. So I think that the Quad has has expressed its opposition to such behavior, particularly by China.
Okay. We leave it here. Thank you very much, Meera Shankar ji, for being with us and shedding great analysis on the evolution of Quad, so to say. Thank you for being with us.